Sacha, welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, usually I like to here's all the cool things that this person's done and why you need to listen to this episode. But in your case, I wanted to kind of go through those things a little bit at a time. But I think it's so fascinating that not only are you a business owner, but you're also an author.
Mm-hmm.
And not just an author of one book, of many books. So let's talk about the books that I'm aware of first. Okay. So you've got these great books. Now, we love story on this podcast, and this is why you're here. Okay. You're a business owner who's transitioned into writing these books for a reason, to grow a business. And many of the folks that are listening, that's in the back of their mind. Some of them haven't given themselves the permission yet, but it's there. And so let's talk about, you've got the 13 steps. Which order did you write these in, by the way? Okay. So let's talk about these three first here. The Anatomy of Prose, 10 Steps to Hero, and 13 Steps to Evil.
Mm-hmm. So the first book was 13 Steps to Evil, How to Craft a Super Bad Villain.
Super bad.
Yeah. The second book was 10 Steps to Hero, How to Craft a Kick-Ass Protagonist. And my most recent book is The Anatomy of Prose, 12 Steps to Sensational Sentences. And I have to say, that's a real test because I've now written enough books that trying to remember all of the finicky details can be troublesome for my brain. But yeah.
All right. So the 13 Steps to Evil, How to Craft a Super Bad Villain. So what I loved about when I started reading your book is the humor and the little sidebars and the things that make a book interesting and unexpected. Our brains desire to an area that's familiar, but it has to be a little bit unique or different. And that's what your writing does. Why do you write that way? And where did you get the moxie to just start to own it?
So I think this is a really interesting question. And there's a real difference between author voice and character voice. And those in nonfiction in particular, so for your audience, I assume they will mostly be writing business or marketing or mindset, industry specific books.
Mm-hmm.
They will be writing with their author voice. And for me, I wanted to be me, but on steroids. So that is basically what I do. I try to condense the most me elements of me onto the page. Now, the interesting thing is, a lot of people who know me in real life or who listen to my podcast or who watch webinars I do or whatever, say they actually hear me speaking when they're reading it. Now, the way that I do that is by, as I've mentioned, I think about the things that are most me. So my whole brand, my whole ethos, the whole thing that I put out into the world is based on three values or three principles. So they are, in no particular order either, being motivational, being knowledgeable, and being a little bit rebellious.
Okay.
And I allow those three things to influence me and what I write right down at the sentence level. So, for example, instead of writing, say, the definition of ROI as, well, it's the return on your business investment that you have put in with the money that you have spent and blah, 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 blah. I'd be allowing that rebellious, motivational, knowledgeable self to affect and influence the word choices that I'm making. So yes, I would still have the core definition of what ROI is and what it means, but I might be a bit sarcastic. I might throw in am I allowed to say naughty words on this podcast, or is this a clean podcast?
Yes, you can say naughty words. My mom's heard them before, and she one of my biggest listeners. So go for it.
Okay, so I might throw in a dick joke, or I might throw in a swear word, or, I might explain it in a cheeky way. Because the thing is, so many nonfiction books are super dry. And if you want people to learn and to truly solve the problem that you're trying to solve with your nonfiction book, being dry is not the way to do it.
Boring.
It's boring, exactly. So I try to I try to throw in humor, and it might be a tangent. It might be a whimsical story. It might be a made-up swear word. I am known for making up swear words, okay? Like fudge banging collywobble. It's a completely nonsensical word, but fuck it, I threw it into my book, So yeah, like I know my values, I know my 3 principles, and I always try to put those at the sentence level of my marketing copy, my books, my workbooks, whatever it is I'm doing. I try to always have, and you can't always do it. Some people have 5 principles or 2 principles, and sometimes you can only have 1 or 2 of them. But for the most part, I try to always have all 3. And if I embody those even down at the sentence level, then you become the most you on the page.
Yeah. So you're talking about vulnerability. Okay. So you started off writing fiction, and at some point you started to self-identify as can start teaching people how to write better fiction. So now I'm going to do a nonfiction book on how to write better fiction books. But there's this point as a leader or as someone that's going to teach that you have to be comfortable being vulnerable. And then when you declare your values, that's one of the things that make you vulnerable. But what you're doing is drawing a line and making people that go, I admire that. I want to get closer. I want to learn more. I want to buy into that. And other people go, oh, and then they'll be repelled by that. Where did you kind of cross the line where you said, okay, I'm totally fine being vulnerable now. I can declare these and be more polarizing, not in in a rebellious way, but also it's just, if you study successful people, that's in their business model. They all have a declaration of values. Where did you like, okay, I'm gonna own that? What happened?
Birth. No, I'm joking. I'm half joking. Like, I come from a super rebellious family. My great grandmother was a total rebel. My grandmother is a rebel. My father was a rebel. So I think there is some genetic rebellion in me. But where did it come from? I think I made a mistake with my fiction, in that I tried to write what I thought a genre wanted and a genre that I loved reading. And I love the fiction that I've written so far, but it doesn't sit comfortably with me. And when I started, so the way that I came to writing my nonfiction books was a complete accident. I'm like senile, and if I don't write down the things that I'm learning, I forget them. And I am a very studious student. I will continue to learn my whole life. And I was learning all of these writing things, and I needed somewhere to put these craft lessons down. So I just put them online without really thinking about it. And because I wasn't really thinking about it, I was just letting me be me on the page. And so I swore, and I was making jokes, and I was just me. And so at that point in my journey, there was no conscious decision to be like that. As my website and my content started growing, there was an acute awareness that I was polarizing people, and I would get some snide remarks and some snide comments. And I still remember a conversation I had with a very prominent indie author, and they said, you have to make a choice. Either when you publish this book, you choose to be you and you go the whole hog, or you tone it down. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, actually, I already made that mistake with my fiction. I'm not going to make the same mistake with my nonfiction. And so it was a conscious choice. And if anything, I slightly over-egged it with the villains book, just because I was like, well, no, I'm not going to be told what I can and can't write in my book and the jokes that I can put in there. So I think it was a genuine rebellion to allow my real voice on the page, which has been a wonderful serendipitous happenstance, because now it enables me to be completely free to write the way that I want to write with all of my nonfiction books going forward. But that doesn't make it easy, because when you are your true self, you're going to get haters. And I can assure you I get haters. I have had 1-star reviews because I've sworn in my book. Literally, wonderful content, shame about the swearing, 1 star. Really? Are you really coming to the nonfiction book for like perfectly conservative prose, or are you here for the knowledge? Like, let's be real. And that's hard, and it's continuous. And the more you embody yourself and the more you continue to be you in your books with your voice, and you actively choose to be polarizing, the more you're going to get this. But I have definitely come to a, like an equilibrium, a place of contentment over this, because I now have found my tribe, and therefore I'm completely okay with irritating some people, because they're just not my people and they're never going to be my people. And I think that the more I focus on this voice, this persona, this part of me, the more I am delivering exactly what my tribe want. So I think, yes, if you have this value or principle or part of you in your business that's slightly controversial or perhaps polarizing or, very niche, then you do have to accept that you are going to put some people off, and that is okay. If anything, it's brilliant, because it means you're over delivering value to your niche audience who want it. And when you do that, you create super fans.
There's this band called The Providers, and the bass player, he does these teaching exercises, videos on YouTube for bass players. And his framework, first you imitate, then you assimilate, and then you create. And that really resonated with me. But there's this pressure that society has, that society wants you to conform, don't color outside of the lines. And the way to kind of break through that barrier is to go through this overly rebellious stage where you push, and it's because you're not settled in your confidence, and so you overreact or you overcompensate, and you become more rebellious. But as you start to settle into that, you have this unique value, this unique perspective, this unique voice. You start to settle into it, and it becomes a part of you, and then you can defend it, and you can be confident in it. And then it's more from this area of peace and confidence, as opposed to overcompensation. And so hearing you describe your process there, is you described that beautifully, where you got into an area where, okay, I'm okay. They're going to give me 1 star, but what is that person doing? They're advertising to the audience that goes, oh, I don't want a boring book. I'm totally okay with that. I'm going to check this out. I wonder what those words are. That was a beautiful compliment in a backhanded way, really.
Yeah. And funny you say about it being a compliment. I didn't choose those words. So yes, I think I've always embodied those words, but my audience gave me those words literally, because I ran a poll to say, okay, guys, when you read my work, when you hear my podcast, when you think of me, what is it that you think of? And so my audience helped to frame what I probably already knew, but those were the guys who gave me those words, which I think there's so much power there, because it was what I was doing already, but it helped to give it a point of reference, a set of values from which I can then create the story and persona of me.
So in your 13 steps, 10 steps, 12 steps, why those exact numbers? Did you really have to stretch to get to 13 steps for evil? Or is it like a tie-in to 13? Or are there really 13 legitimate steps to get to a super bad villain? I
couldn't possibly tell you that. No, I'm joking. So I definitely wanted to use the number 13 because it's a play on 13 being seen as superstitious or whatever. Did I have to stretch it? No, if anything, I had to condense it and take things out because I was adamant I was having 13. So yes, I would. No, I don't think I stretched that one. I think I pulled stuff out which I may or may not use in a later book later on. In terms of the other two, that was much more natural. The hero one, what I didn't want to do was have another book that was 13. So I try to avoid having the same numbers. Once I have a few more books, then maybe if I have another number, then fine, whatever. But I tried to avoid having the same number. When I started The Anatomy of Prose, I think it was more like 18. And I just, over the course of writing it and structuring it and restructuring it, because nonfiction, the hardest thing to do is the structure. I just stripped stuff out because it's a beast of a book. It is, I think it's close to 70,000 words, which is far bigger than the other. It's like almost double the other two. So I was like, this is more than enough steps. I need to pull shit out. But it was just mostly organic.
So what's interesting to me as far as the book on villains is really the reason you want to write a really strong villain is to really highlight your hero. You can, unless that hero has a significant villain, then the hero is going to be anemic, boring, namby-pamby. Where did that epiphany come from for you? It's like, I got to have better villains.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think for me personally, and one of the drivers behind the book, it was rage. And I was just ranting in my blogs about how crap all of these TV villains were and how cliched they were and all of this stuff. But the story reason, it comes from a frustration. So all story is about change. Okay, that is at the heart of every single story. Doesn't matter if it's a fairy tale, if it's a Hollywood bestseller movie, if it's a literary fiction novel. Every single story is about change. And you don't get change unless you have some kind of a driver, some kind of a pushing force that will push your hero out of their comfort zone and force change. Humans are exactly the same. We don't change unless we have to. We are lazy bastards. Like, that is just it. We don't change. We don't fix it if it isn't broken. We are habitual creatures, and so are heroes. So if you don't have a villain in your story, you aren't going to have a change in your story. Your villain is the driving force. Your villain will put conflict in the story. They put obstacles in the way. They are the conflict that forces and pushes your hero to change who they are in order to defeat them. So yeah, like you can't have a story, you can't have a good hero unless you have a good villain with solid motivation, with and so that is why I find it so frustrating. And lots of people then also worry, oh, well, I don't have a, I don't have an overt, tangible villain in one person. I'm like, that's okay, as long as you have conflict or something that's pushing the hero. It could be an inner flaw, an inner demon, a personal wound from your past. That is a villain conceptually, because it is driving the conflict and the change in your hero.
I have this friend, and she's been fighting a health issue that's been undeclared, and they've struggled to figure out what's causing the issues that she's dealing with. And so she went and finally got to do these very deep tests, and she came back and was energized because she finally got a name for the pain. They were able to identify the villain, and it really energized her. And so when I think about marketing copy, when I think about a business, you have these solutions that you're providing, but the only reason that it comes to your potential customer's mind is because something's happened to make them confront the issue. And so to be able to put a very good name and understand the villain that they're fighting helps you relate and connect.
Yeah. And I would add one more layer to that as well. So with each villain, you also have a theme in your book or an emotional journey. So the emotional journey will be the journey that the hero goes on. But if you're talking about this in terms of business, then you should be looking at your marketing copy in terms of the emotional journey that you want your customer to go on. So if your villain is, now I'm not going to be able to think of a single business problem. Let's say, oh my God, you don't know how to create a website, right, for your business. Okay, let's use kind of in and around your business. So the villain is technology, it's frustration, it's software, it's knowledge that you don't have, skills that your customer don't have. So the emotional journey that they're going on is they're probably frustrated, they might be angry, they will definitely be, they might be upset. So you have a scale of that emotion where you come to a thing that you can't do. Either you're angry, you're frustrated, or you're crying. So you have to convey that, you could be as blunt as saying, are you frustrated with your website? Are you, have you struggled to set up your WordPress or whatever? And it's the emotion that readers connect with in fictional stories, but it's exactly the same in your marketing copy. It's the emotion in your marketing prose, your marketing copy, that your customers will connect to. So you need the problem, which is the villain that you are going to solve, that your heroic business is going to solve, that your customers, who are also your heroes, are going to go on this journey with you. And you need to lead them from their original negative emotion to the positive solution that your company, your business, your services will solve for them, and how they will feel at the end once they have interacted with your product. Perfect. And yeah, if you can do that in your copy, you're going to sell some stuff.
Yeah. So that's cool. So when you were talking about boring villains, cliche villains, was the typical external obvious things. They're rude, they're obnoxious, whatever. But when you want a better villain, you have to get more into that villain needs to really poke at your internal self-doubt, your internal failures, the insecurities that you have. So that villain needs to go, oh, he's really struggling with, he failed his dad. So we need to tease him about what he's not. You failed your dad. And that really, now you're building a villain that's starting to really get to us. But the other thing is is the philosophical application. So it's here I'm building a business. I'm having to adopt this technology that's frustrating, the obvious things, but it makes me feel like a loser. I've built this business. Now I feel like a loser if I don't get this technology implemented. But you know what's even worse is the philosophical thing. It's not fair. This is out of my control. That the world is going to a place where we need to embrace this technology, and I have to figure that out on top of everything else. Do you know how hard it is just to run a successful business? And that's what I love about your villain, is that you're starting to go, all right, we got to poke. That villain's got to be naughty and really kind of read us and understand us more than we want to be known.
Absolutely. One of the things that you touched on there is something that I think is so important and people often get wrong. And that's the specificity required to poke and really dig into someone's wound. Lots of people, when they come to marketing copy and nonfiction books, they try to solve the world's problems. And that's not how you solve anybody's problem. The more general you are with your villain or your problem, the fewer people you're going to help. So one of the things that I think makes the greatest villain is when you are highly detailed and highly specific, because then you get to excellence and you get to you then, okay, you don't solve everybody's problems in the world, but you're going to solve some people's problems extremely well. And then if you can convey that, it also means you're then connecting to the right people, because the right people are identifying that your product is the right product for them. So I think there is, an element that lots of people get wrong with their villains, and that is to try and be a villain for everybody. Don't try and be a villain for everybody. Just try and be a villain for a very niche section of people, and then you can be a really good villain.
Totally. You need to demonstrate. So when I have conversations with folks on this podcast, what I love about it is that we're having conversations that we never would have at a bar, because we'd be interrupted or other people would be there. So we wouldn't get to go very deep. We're going to laugh and joke about different things, but we're not going to have this one-on-one and talk about nerdy stuff, because we're going to talk about things that the other people aren't going to relate to. And it's like, oh, I'm not weird. Sacha is nerdy about this, so I'm not weird. There's other people like me. When you're demonstrating you understand the deeper challenges that people are facing with this change, that's what you're doing. You're relating on a deeper level, and they trust you because you've been there. Oh, I'm not crazy. You've been there, so I'm going to lean in and listen more, because you're pinging the deeper struggles that I have that most people wouldn't understand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Your copy when you've started to write these 3 books, you decided to write those books because you read other books and you thought those are superficial and they're not really addressing the real problem. So you started to sit down and start going deeper. And that's what your marketing copy, that's what your marketing, I can say this, I swear I can. Yeah. That's where your marketing copy can really convey deeper value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Sacha, your last name's Black. Your book's 13 Steps to Evil. There was some foreshadowing. It was like one time I was asked, so Steve, your last name's Brown. And was that little foreshadowing that you're going to write a book about a toilet? And so I was like going, look, her name's Black. So I'd love this. Talk a little bit more about this rebellious family you come from.
Well, it's funny you say, because Sacha Black is not my real name. It is a pen name. And I did choose black because I am a black sheep and black is my favorite color. So yes, there was some foreshadowing in there. Whether or not it was foreshadowing that I was going to write a book about villains. I don't know. But when you're a kid and your favorite film is Beetlejuice, it's probably indicative that you're going to write a quirky book when you get older. But yeah, my grandmother was, great-grandmother, sorry, was very controversial back in her day. And, you know, I've got photos of her holding Tommy guns in hotels. And, you know, she funded, she was quite a wealthy lady, and she funded a lot of the black jazz musicians in New York. And yeah, there's just my dad, you know, he's a very naughty boy. He got kicked out of lots of schools. Got arrested on the day of my birth, or only because he was drunk, not because he was wetting the baby's head and got a bit too carried away. So yeah, I just come from a very rebellious family. I have always had an issue with authority. What else? I mean, I've never, you know, I'm not about to go out and do horrible things and get arrested, but my rebellion comes in the form of things like seeing rules I don't like and purposefully trying to break them. So for example, I had somebody, I used to work in the corporate rat race, very corporate conservative government department. And I was told I wasn't dressed corporately enough. And I was like, hold the phone. What has what I'm wearing got to do with my ability to turn up and perform in a meeting or type emails or write reports? So I went to work in leggings and Converse the following day, like Converse trainers. And I went the day after that, and the day after that, and every day after that. I refused to wear any suits, any corporate, anything, because what? That is utter nonsense. Like, so yeah, and obviously I got lots of, you know, I was told I would never get any more senior in that organization because I wouldn't play the game. And yet every single person who worked with me said I was phenomenal at my job. And so it, you know, there again, the polarizing thing we were talking about, you have to make a choice with your company and your business and your branding. Are you going to toe the corporate line and play the game, or are you going to be the black sheep in the organization? I was the black sheep. And yeah, so that's where that came from. And I suppose that is, you know, one of the reasons that I was also an indie author, because I'm not going to have a publisher tell me what to do. And therefore it made a lot of sense, I think, to then incorporate that into my branding, because it's so much part of who I am.
I think that's a common theme among entrepreneurs. There's a version of that story. And I always say that, you know, my heroes, the people that I see are the heroes, are the entrepreneurs. They're actually the invisible heroes of our economy, because they confronted some story similar to what you just described and said, you know what, I'm just going to go start my own thing. Even though I'm not totally prepared, even though I don't have an MBA, even though I don't have all this money, I'm just going to go start it. And what happens? They start to get customers, they start to get employees, they start to provide products and services that people appreciate because they just wanted to do it their way. And so I see my job, or my agency's job, as we're supposed to help them navigate the gauntlet that they're going to have to go through, because they have to grow up and become good business people. Whether they're rebels or not, they still have to compete in the most competitive game of all, business. So we're supposed to come along and support them and help them avoid some ditches that they would step in. They get out of it, but we could save them some time and some frustration. Where did you get, you've got a natural inclination towards branding and style when you look at your book covers and the way that you approach stuff. You have workbooks, you have a podcast, and you have a natural inclination on how to grow a business. Where does that come from?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I'm not sure about the natural ability, but I think that I have purposefully and intentionally studied business, and I have listened to podcasts from the beginning, and I have listened to the mistakes that other people have made, and I have read mindset books and branding books and business, and listened to other authors in the industry. And also I've kept my eyes open and been observant and intentionally observant, because I think a lot of people go through life, and with respect to many people in my generation as a millennial, they have their face glued to a screen. And yes, some of that, that is where life is happening, unfortunately, at the moment. But I try to be very observant of the detail that people are doing with their businesses. So, and it's so funny because I'm not really a detailed person, but I think because I'm not a detailed person, like on my Myers-Briggs, I'm an N off the scale. So I don't know if people know what Myers-Briggs is, but basically it's a continuum, and either you get your energy, so you're introvert or extrovert, but in terms of where you derive your energy, you're a detailed person or you're a strategic person, you are a emotional decision maker or a very logical, rational decision maker, you're a planner, or you do things last minute, a bit more spontaneous. And I basically have zero ability with details. But I think because of that, I overtly and intentionally spend more time on details. So I like to deconstruct. I deconstruct every book I read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, to look for lessons that I can take away. When I go to somebody's website, I deconstruct what they've done. When I look at somebody's book series, I deconstruct what they've done. How do I know they're all linked books? How do I know what colors have they used to identify across their series? When I go into a bookstore, I will intentionally look. When you go into a bookstore, you can identify your favorite genre by the feel and look just of the books in that area. They all share something. And it should be the same in your business. When people come to my website or my podcast or my Facebook group, people should be able to feel, we're talking about emotions again, feel the same things wherever you go. And I think that's where it comes from. It's just, I am a super nerd, and I will go down into forensic levels of detail. I've had people describe me like that before. You go into forensic levels of detail. And that is something that goes into my books as well. So The Anatomy of Prose is a forensic level look at sentences and gives you a developmental edit in a sense. And yeah, it comes from this observational skill, I think. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
And you're sticking to it.
I am.
So, have you read the books Save the Cat by Blake Snyder? Or okay, so he puts these it's how to write a movie, or what's the word? Play.
Logline?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's one of the things that you do, but he puts them in genres like Monster in the House.
Yes.
And Dude Who Has a Problem. I love how he's categorized those things. Now, those are types of stories that have a common challenges and themes in them. Is that the way that you're approaching your villain, for example, the 13 rules? Your villain would be in that Dude Who Has a Problem or Monster in the House. It's a different type of villain, I would imagine. But are there like genres that your villains excel in?
There are archetypes. So I'm not sure how I would relate this to business and marketing, but in terms of fictional villains, there are what you would call archetypes. So you have your femme fatale, so Basic Instinct, for example, your bunny boiling crazy woman.
Yeah.
You have the overlords, for example, who are like Sauron from Lord of the Rings. Lord Voldemort is an overlord. Not a very comprehensive motivation for what they're doing, but they are all powerful. It's another type of archetype. You have the jealous type. So somebody quite often seen in more contemporary books, romance, perhaps somebody who is bitter and jealous, perhaps you stole their boyfriend or whatever. So yes, there are different archetypes and types of villain. I am sure that you could relate this to business. In terms of I say it would probably be more in the types of problems that you're trying to solve. I haven't necessarily thought about it in those terms, but absolutely, I think you could put your villain in buckets. And yeah, sorry, that's not a very good answer, but
no, it's good. You have a quote in your book about villains. It's like goes along with the quote: behind every good man there's this good woman, right? But behind every good hero, it's more important about having a really good villain. And I love that comment. And it's smart, and it makes sense. It's a theme that you need to acknowledge and pay attention to, and not drop the ball there.
Yeah, and if you want to relate it to business, behind every good marketing solution is a problem.
Yeah, and so you need to be better at identifying where that problem is poking them. So who is your hero as far as someone that does what you do really well, that you crush on or follow or learn from?
There are so many people. Joanna Penn is probably the biggest. Joanna Penn is the original one. So I fell into, as I was falling into the indie sphere, I came across her. I don't remember how I stumbled upon her now, probably because she has an excellent author ecosystem for her business. But yeah, so I have been listening to her podcast definitely the longest and learnt the most for the longest time from her.
You were on her podcast too.
I was. Yeah, that was mind blowing. I can't tell you. I've now been in a very fortunate position to have had dinner and met her several times, but yeah, that was very surreal. That when I got to go on her podcast. But yeah, so she's definitely one. There's another couple of authors, Jay Thorne and Rachel Herron, who have this wonderful podcast called The Writer's Well, and it's so philosophical and thought-provoking, and I love their ethoses. They're very free-spirited and very much about independence, which is what entrepreneurs are about, and they're both entrepreneurs in their own way, in their own fields. And I love that they both have multiple streams of income, and they are not just an author. They have a business and they run retreats and all of these things. So I love what they both do, and I'm very fortunate that I'm now co-writing with Jay Thorne, which is just mind-boggling. Because I've been listening to their podcasts forever as well. It's very weird once you've been in this industry for a long time. You yes, you have your heroes, but actually if you do something intentionally for long enough, you become in that ecosystem. Who else? I mean, there's just so many people. Orna Ross, again. So she is the director of the Alliance of Independent Authors and the founder of it. And she changed my life. I have an awful lot to thank her for. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have been able to leave my job when I left my job to do this full time. So I absolutely have to give her props and her credit. And then also Christina Stanley, because she is just a fucking powerhouse of a woman. She is so inspirational, and she is such a feminist, a strong woman, and so clever when you listen to her talking. So yeah, I absolutely have to say her too.
Awesome. So that's how you and I got connected. I interviewed her for this podcast, and she'll be on an episode. We'll be publishing that very soon. But she suggested that I meet you, and I'm glad she did. This has been a fascinating conversation. I could go on for another hour, but we have to wrap up here. So Your podcast is called?
The Rebel Author Podcast. And I also have a second one called Next Level Authors, which
We just have all this free time. So we're going to do, so I'm sorry, interrupt. What's the name of your other one?
Next Level Authors. And it's a jointly hosted one with a good friend of mine.
Okay. And then you're also a speaker.
Mm-hmm.
You have another book coming out. Is there something going on that we're not aware of that you might want to share?
So I just released The Anatomy of Prose. That's the one that came out the most recently. And I've got two collaborative books that I handed off yesterday, which I can't talk about just yet, unfortunately, which is a spot of bad timing. But there will be, I will continue to write nonfiction and fiction. So there will be hopefully at least another one or two by the end of the year. So
your website is?
sachablack.co.uk, and that's Sacha with a C and not an S. So SACHA, Black, the color black.
Typically rebel spelling there.
Mm-hmm, of course, always on brand, darling.
So if they want to send you an email and get on a list so that they learn about these things you can't tell about us right now, where would they email you?
So you can, if you go to my website, sachablack.co.uk, there is like a pop-up and it will pop up on the screen and you can sign up and find out more about what I do.
Well, you do great as a guest on a podcast about business and marketing. This has been excellent. It's been pithy and edifying and all the big words I know. So happy to have you, and thank you for being a great guest on the ROI Online Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and that's a wrap.